Welcome back to the Wolverine.com podcast video edition. We are with Tom Crawford, one of our absolute all-time favorites here on the podcast. Was getting all kinds of good fan feedback this week about Tom Crawford and about the podcast. So, Tom, you are more than welcome into a championship week podcast, at least the lead up to a championship. The playoffs coming up. I appreciate you being here. You have to be very excited about this week.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love all the Maize and Blue fans showing the love for the podcast, John. It's an honor and privilege to be on every week. And I'll be honest with you. I just looking at some stuff I'm packing for the to go down to the Orange Bowl, and one of them is a kind of a bag for Big Ten Media Days that I got in Indianapolis, and I remember taking a picture standing in front of someone took a picture of me of the national championship trophy, and little did I think in late July of 2021 that I think Michigan would be this close as we're speaking today to holding up that trophy on the night of January 10th, which will be played in Indy where we had that media day. So crazy, crazy year in college football. Crazy good for the Michigan Wolverines.
No doubt about it. I want to tap into this a little bit because you have such a unique perspective. You are an accomplished analyst who sits in the press box on high and can cite chapter and verse from the 60s to the 70s right through Lloyd Carr and the 97 championship all the way up through today, and knows it backwards and forwards. At the same time, you are a Michigan grad who knows this whole thing from a fan side. You have a unique approach to how you're going about this Orange Bowl trip. I'd like you to just to share a little bit about that and and kind of give some insight from that side of it.
That's a great question, and people ask me, are you going fan, you going media, and I guess I'm unique in what in my role, and I've been in the press box on and off for most of the last 20 years, and the last 11 consecutive years. Season ticket holder for 43 years, four generations of Michigan grads, 13 degrees in my immediate family, my parents, and my siblings and stuff at the University of Michigan. We got a lot of Michigan blood, maize and blue blood in us. But I am an admitted fan. I'm fan media, as we call it, and I think there's more and more of that. I think in all due respect to all the platforms on the Wolverine.com, I think you guys would admit you and Ballas and other. I mean, you want Michigan to win. Yeah, you're covering it professionally, but deep down you want them to win. I'm a little bit, that on steroids, if you will, because it is very difficult to restrain myself in that press box, those 7 home games. I'm going to be honest with you. I got to go for walks sometimes, go get another bottle of water and just kind of walk it off. But I'm involved with a TV show, Fox 47, Press Pass with Jack Ebling, and I do this podcast, so I qualify as media. I'm covering the team, but I'm just doing it from a no holds barred. I bleed maize and blue, and I want Michigan to win.
Mm-hmm. All right, and so tap into that fan mindset just a little bit, and tell me before we start to analyze this game, analyze for me the feeling among the Michigan faithful, because boy has it ever been a dry spell leading up to those magic moments when Michigan put away Ohio State. Michigan took care of Iowa. I get that we've moved forward. That's in the past, but the fact of it is, it's recent memory, and it is a just such a massive breakthrough for Michigan compared to what people had gone through for almost 2 decades.
Yeah, and you think back that of all the accomplishments Michigan football has done, the fact that they're the first unranked preseason in the polls, Michigan is the only college football team to be unranked and then go to the CFP. That's an amazing accomplishment. Michigan typically is always accused of being overrated. Well, they were underranked and underappreciated, and we bought into all of the optics that we saw last year. And I'm feeling, I mean, I'm excited. I think Michigan's going to win, but right now I'm in the mentality that I feel like Michigan could beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because I don't think straight when it comes to Michigan. And I'm just being totally candid with you. I think they're going to beat Georgia, and I think they're going to beat Alabama. And it's probably more emotion and thinking with my heart as opposed to my brain. But I look at the scenario both ways. I see Georgia winning, I see Michigan winning, but and most of these visions that I have, and I think about this game constantly. I will say that right now as the time draws closer to Friday night. I see Michigan winning the game more than Georgia winning the game, and all these little imageries that are having him dancing in my head this holiday time.
So tell me this: if Georgia happened to beat Michigan on Friday night, and that would not be certainly something that would shock a lot of people across the nation. You know, Georgia comes into this game, I would say, looked at by most people as the favorite. What? How would this season then become? What would this? What would the accomplishments of this team be? Would it be a very successful season? How would you look back on it?
Another great question. Very successful. I mean, and it just goes back to brought up in the, Bo Schembechler era, following it as a teenager and then going to school in the 70s when Big Ten championships were an automatic thing, and then following it through the 90s with that great run, late 80s and early 90s, that 5 year run. It's all about Big Ten championships. You got to win a Big Ten champ. They won a Big Ten championship for the first time in 17 years. They finally went to Indy. They finally got that monkey off their back, and they went to Indy and they pounded Iowa, and they had a great fan following there at Indy. It was like this is what I wanted for so doggone long, and it finally happened. And I'm not saying that, I mean, if Michigan loses to Georgia, there's no question about it, it's going to hurt because they're so close. And the closer you get, we learn this in basketball, the more it hurts. I mean, it took me a few weeks to get over that Louisville loss in basketball in 2013. That's just kind of the way I'm wired, John. And
Hmm.
and it'll hurt, but I mean, looking back at this year, this was a great year, and I am so excited moving forward now, with the changes that Jim Harbaugh made, how he handles his team, how he has younger assistants, and just everything that he's done. Because he's looked at himself, I think, and made changes, which I think is a great attribute. If you're willing to make change and you're not stubborn, and he certainly wasn't, and now he's being rewarded with Coach of the Year type awards. So I'm all bullish on the Maize and Blue moving forward to 2022, and hopefully we got more to cheer on here in 2021.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that moving forward here shortly, but let's focus on the game right now. Michigan, Georgia. Tell me, as you have listened to the principals talk about this thing in the days leading up. We know that Georgia has had a touch of COVID flare up. We know we haven't heard much in terms of Michigan with issues in that area. You know about the fact that Georgia has a great defense that didn't look so great against Alabama, but most defenses don't look great against Alabama. Tell me what you say you have these pictures in your head of Michigan winning. Talk about some of the nuts and bolts of how that could get done and what the things you worry about in terms of this game happen to involve.
Okay, well, I go back to, always, run the damn ball thing that I've been, yearning for the last few years, and finally run the damn ball is now becoming a T-shirt on this team, and it's a mantra on
Exactly.
this
They heard
program.
Harbaugh heard you.
Yeah, it must have been. So my point is this, John, is that I see Michigan hitting the edge on this in terms of running game. I think Blake Corum is going to be huge on bubble type screens and outside zone plays where he's going to get outside and get some outstanding blocking. I think that's going to be part of the equation. I think Hassan Haskins is going to be having a hard time getting productivity on those inside. I mean, my God, their interior line is going to be tough to run on. But if you get to a manageable state, if you get to 200 yards rushing, Michigan's going to win this football game. Maybe that's a lot to ask. At least 150 minimum. They got to be able to run the football. They can't have that twin digit running output, or they're going to get beat. I just think they're going to have to be able to run the football between Haskins and Corm, and then Donovan Edwards. Basically those bubble screens and things like that. I want Michigan. Obviously, I see them running, being productive, moving the football. The thing that I'm fearing more than anything, and I said this, I think, in the last podcast, is I'm cringing the fact that Georgia will be able to run the football on Michigan's defense. Because if that happens, sirens are going to go off in my head that this is not a good look. These are not good optics that you know basically indicate that this is going to be a good evening of football on December 31st. Maybe I'm overstating that, but if Georgia runs on Michigan, I'm going to start having beads of sweat go down my temple. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Donovan Edwards' name because we talk a lot about running to set up the pass. I think there's such a thing as running the edges or hitting the edges to set up maybe a sneak through or two by Hassan Haskins in that inside game. If if you are getting them off the edge with the sweeps, with the bubble screens, with the things that you really can't attack with your interior defenders. And I think Donovan Edwards can be a major, major part of that. Corum and Edwards, I really think that that could loosen some things up a little bit on that interior. And maybe you do catch them a time or two. I just like the way they have developed so many weapons. I think that they were very smart. Again, with their quarterbacks and getting the top two guys in there. It makes me wonder what is in the bag of tricks for JJ McCarthy in this game. You have Cade McNamara as steady Eddie in there and not throwing the ball to the other team all year. You have to hope that that continues if you're a Michigan fan and looking for the perfect way to beat the Bulldogs. Certainly not to give them the football, but this offense has really developed since those early days. I mean, it was like your delight early with their averaging 300 yards a game in the first three games, but other people were saying, "Oh man, they can't throw the football. They can't. They're running it because they can't throw it." And we
Right.
found that just wasn't true. And they threw the trick plays in there and the explosive plays. And I'm anxious to see with a month what they've come up with to attack these guys.
Well, I look at the second half of the Iowa game when it wasn't exactly I mean, there was some anxiety at halftime with that 14-3 lead over Iowa. I think I'm not alone in expressing that. I mean, a
Mhm.
lot of other nervous-looking Michigan fans around me that, oh, this is kind of precarious. And what happens? Luke Schoonmaker all of a sudden becomes a relevant player. Eric, the tight end becomes part of the mix. I thought the balance attack was, and statistically it shows that when you look at the total yardage, it was about a 50-50 between run pass in that Iowa game. They're going to have to have that kind of balance, John. I think to beat Georgia and keep them kind of on edge a little bit. I'm hoping that's part of it. I think Cade, I mean, he did throw a bad ball with Eric All, end up being a pick. We know that a little bit behind. Maybe should have been caught. I mean, people might argue on that. It's got to be precise on those drag passes. Whether that be Andrew Anthony dragging across like in the Michigan State game, or a tight end doing as well. So if Kate McNamara can be precise, JJ come in there and do his magic of really threatening that defense with his athleticism. Because that was, obviously when he gets in there, I mean, seemingly things open up. I think there's just more awareness on the defense that he's in there with his feet, and maybe that gets some vulnerability on the defense. I don't know. You're not going to beat Georgia up the middle. I watched the Alabama Georgia game a couple of times. and their lateral speed did not impress me at all against Alabama. And I hopefully Michigan can exploit the same thing with Georgia that Bama did.
Well, there you go. You talked about some concern whether or not Michigan can stop the run
Yeah.
against Georgia, and I think that has to be a prime concern. But I'll tell you what, um, as impressive as Mike McDonald has been all season, you could say, yeah, got caught a little bit on the tempo at Michigan State, but
Yes.
here's a guy that just has, I would say, far exceeded expectations because my greatest expectation for a newcomer such as he is, that is, coming in and coordinating a defense for the first time. We know, he was part of great defenses with the Ravens, but actually throwing the switches and actually making the adjustments and all that. Uh, my thing was, hey, hold Ohio State under 50 points because we hadn't seen that lately. Well, he so far exceeded that I'm again very interested to see how he commits his chess players to try and slow down that run and forcing Georgia to throw the ball more.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What a marvelous job he's done. Sharon Moore, all these assistants, Josh Gaddis. I mean, you could go on down the line. Link scale. I mean, they all did a great job, and they all improved. And I'm glad you brought up the Michigan State game because that Michigan State game was kind of a defining moment to this season. I truly think that. I mean, they came back and beat Indiana, and then he went to Penn State and won that game. I thought that season could have gone south, but it didn't. And I thought that was critical. That Indiana game was critical because I thought they could have a hangover here, and they didn't. But they changed. All of a sudden they fixed that situation of having the of offsetting the up tempo with as far as with the substitution patterns. They didn't leave themselves vulnerable to that of late substitutions because I watched that film I watched that tape a few times. It was a Chinese fighter. That's how Kenneth Walker got all those yards. Michigan's defense wasn't even set. And in three glaring plays, it was my God. A lot of running backs could have had those kind of chunk plays. I thought that the other thing about the Michigan State game that I thought was a mistake, and it's easy for me to say as a non-professional in this thing, as a coach, I mean, was Michigan when they took that 30-14 lead, Sanders still had that drag pattern, touchdown to go ahead, and I can still think in my mind if they cannot stop this aerial attack. And all of a sudden, that aerial attack didn't get quite as aggressive after Michigan State countered with that fourth down and they made it 30-22. I thought Michigan got a little conservative then, and then that flipped the game right there. But they learned from that. They
Yes.
learned from that in season. And like I said before, kids got kids improved over the season. A lot of players stood out. Sanders still is a perfect example of that. So this is a different kind of season in that regard. We haven't seen improvements in latter part of a season. We haven't seen Michigan getting hot in November. That's never happened, and
I
that's
like
why this is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And I love the fact that our own Doug Karsh was there in that MSU post game to overhear the head coach calming his team. Those guys were silent. They were in tears. They were torn up. And Jim Harbaugh said to them, guys, it's not over. We're going to pull this thing back together and we're going to win this thing. And that really kind of set the tone, and they followed through with it. Let me ask you this about Jim Harbaugh and the best staff that I have seen him put together in his time at Michigan thus far, and that would be simply this. We know that there's an awful lot of money out there for coaches, and we know that everybody's looking to move up. What are your thoughts about the chances to keep this group together and moving forward like they have this year?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, and it's a compliment to your staff. I mean, you want to have your staff be sought after. That indicates that you got guys that are great coaches, and I'm hoping that it can stay engaged for another year at least. I mean, we're sitting here almost at the end of January, and a lot of the movement in the coaching in the coaching world is slowed down a little bit, at least temporarily. And that could always change. But it'd be really cool if they stood intact. Like, I'm not saying run a Pat Fitzgerald thing where you got your 12, you got your 10 assistants hanging there for 12 years, which he which he had. You talk about continuity. What Fitz had at Northwestern. I'm not expecting that, but it would be really nice. And there's one other thing I wanted that I want to mention right now before I forget it. And this goes back to another aspect of Michigan's team that has performed very well: special team play, the kicking game, punting obviously has been great. And then I mean, Jake Moody, my God, he didn't have to kick a field goal against Iowa. Clearly, just extra points. He had what, 6 extra points? Okay, he's going to have to kick field goals, and knock on wood, that All-American kicker is going to still kick like an All-American, because I think that there's going to be some red zone situations where they're going to have to kick, and it's not going to be any shame having to kick against Georgia, as good as they are, particularly in the red zone.
I still remember seeing Jake Moody's parents in a local eatery northwest of Penn State before that game, and that wasn't a game that Jake Moody had to figure heavily
Right.
into. It's a great reminder that these are basically young men with parents all kinds of hopes and dreams, and that they will be down there in Miami for this one. When we talk about the players, we talk about the players that have made this thing go this year. You're talking about Aiden Hutchinson. You're talking about David Ojabo. You're talking about younger guys like Cade McNamara and Blake Corum. I had an interesting conversation with another of our guys, one of our favorites, certainly Doug Skeen, who knows this stuff inside and out. And I said, what is the secret to keeping this going? Obviously,
Great
they
question.
found lightning in the bottle this year. They found the sweet sauce, the magic formula, whatever you want to call it, to have the breakthrough, to make it happen. How do you keep that going? And I'm going to have a lot of what he said in a column tomorrow. But he also, I'll just give you a little hint of the flavor of it. He puts a lot of it on these players, on the leaders, on who's going to be the next Aiden Hutchinson, because we know Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a very, very high NFL draft choice, if not number one. Your thoughts on what you saw out of this team that they need to retain? Aside, we've already talked about the coaches, but what else keeps this thing looking like it did, especially in November?
Well, you're going to have to, not to get ahead of the next year, but you're going to have extraordinary leaders like Aiden Hutchinson, Hassan Haskins, and Josh Ross. I mean, we saw this down at Big Ten Media Days, and they're all saying the same thing. It was such an assertive, competent, we're going to get this right. And then we had the three players, and then Jim Harbaugh was this with it, who looked like he was fit as a fiddle. I didn't even recognize when he walked in there. I hadn't seen him in a while. He had lost weight, and he had this smile. I mean, it was a different version of Jim Harbaugh. And when the question from the Ohio State media, those guys, the Tim Mays of the world, they go and raid that place. They gang
Gotcha.
up on Harbaugh, and he asked him about, can you beat Ohio State? It's always an Ohio State centric kind of commentary, and my God, half of the guys are from Ohio State. They just raid that place, and that's where the comment, "Yeah, we're going to beat him, or we're going to die trying." And I thought that was a great answer, because he didn't avoid it like he did in the past, and it wasn't. He didn't have a mean look to him. He had a positive look to him, and I think that is that's radiated down into the players. And we've talked about before, and like Skeen talked about, what I've talked about with other coaches. The best led teams are player led teams. And so Michigan's got to figure out who the next Aiden Hutchinson is, and Hassan Haskins and Ross are going to be to lead this team. And I know they got a ton of candidates on that team. But
No doubt.
that's going to be really interesting to see who evolves. And there's a lot to choose from. And Stardust and all those guys that have left this year, that's a big thing to replace. But I think the culture is there for those leaders to evolve in 2022 as well.
Yeah, and I think one of them, is has an interesting scenario because he might be in a situation where not everybody thinks he's going to be a starter, and that's your quarterback from this year. Cade
Yeah.
McNamara could be an excellent quarterback, but he's going to be in a battle for the starting job,
Yeah.
or maybe sharing time. So I think that'll be a fascinating thing about next year. This year, I got to play the game with you. Michigan beats Georgia Friday night. If
There are a lot of ifs there. Do I have a select number like
limit it to three.
Okay, I'll limit it to 3. Turnovers under turnovers gotta be 2 or under.
Okay.
Max 2. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
max 2 turnovers, okay? And they gotta run the football for 175 yards. And this I'll go with a buck 75. They get to a buck 75. I think they're gonna win this game. And then as far as defensively, they're going to have they're going to have to hold Georgia, in my mind, to 350 yards of offense or
All right.
less.
Very good. And of course, cannot escape the flip side. Michigan does not win this game if.
If they turn the ball over more than all those times, I think it's the biggest thing that for me is it's one glaring thing that George is able to run the football. I'll just double down on what I said before.
Right.
There's been teams that have run the football on Michigan. I mean, Rutgers ran the football on Michigan, and Nebraska ran the football on Michigan, and obviously Michigan State did as well. So they can't have 200 plus yards of rushing and big chunk plays of 25 plus through the running game. They're in serious trouble, as I stated before, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Which puts a little extra spotlight on some guys that have really, really come along this year, and that would be Chris Hinton and Mozzie Smith, not to
Oh yeah.
mention Josh Ross. Those three guys will be absolutely key elements to this game. We talk a lot about Hutch and Ojabo, but those guys, those anchors in the middle, are going to be a whole lot.
No question about it. I mean, we know what the bookends can do, but it's that middle, and I mean, then they're going to have to. The worst thing a quarterback wants to have is pass rush up the middle. It's bad enough when you got those All American DNs coming at you, but if you got to up the middle and put some kind of pressure, on Georgia's quarterback, whoever it's going to be, the one of the two, they're going to be really struggling offensively. And Michigan could create some major havoc on Georgia's offense if they're going to get some penetration. Just like Tom Brady hates it coming up the middle. All good quarterbacks hate it coming up the middle. It discombobulates you real quick.
Tom Crawford going to be in the stands on
Yeah.
Friday night. I am looking forward to seeing some of your from that perspective, some of your video that you come away with, and just look forward to talking to you after this one.
Oh yeah, I got all my maze out gear. I got it all packed. Heading out tomorrow, and I can't wait, John. I look forward to covering it. Hopefully, a big Michigan win and a berth in the CFP championship game on January 10th. We'll talk about it next week.
Sounds great.